Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Catherine and this is Raspberry Reads. Today I thought I would do something a little bit fun and very nostalgic for me. I'm going to share some of my favorite children's literature. Now the caveat is I'm going to share Canadian children's literature. So I'm living in the UK and I've lived here for over a decade, but I am from Canada, I'm Canadian, and therefore the literature that I grew up with was primarily Canadian, apart from some classics. So I should caveat by saying that the books that I'm going to share today, most of them would be defined as classic Canadian children's literature these days. I'm not as up to date with sort of current Canadian children's literature. I know there's some great work out there, but these are all the books that I grew up with. And yes, as I said, many of them are classics. So if you are Canadian and you're wanting to just enjoy Canadian literature, this will be a nice walk down memory lane for you. If you've got children and you live in Canada, I'm sure you are aware of many, if not all of these books. But if you have a little one and you're not from Canada and you'd like to introduce them to some classic Canadian children's literature, then these are some great books to start with. So yeah, let's just get right into it. So the first book, I don't have a copy, is The Sky is Falling by Kit Pearson. And so this is book one in the Guests of War trilogy. I read this book from my public library when I was 11 maybe, or 12, and it definitely had a lasting impression on me. So the first book is all about Nora and her brother Gavin and their two English children. And because of the Second World War, at that time many children were evacuated, some to the country and some countryside rather, and others outside of the UK. And so yeah, Nora and Gavin are two fictional characters, but based on true events of children needing to leave England. But they go on a ship and they go to Canada to live out the rest of the war in safety. So the first book, The Sky is Falling, is all about Nora and Gavin's journey on the ship. And yeah, it was such an impactful book for me. I remember sitting on my bed devouring the book. Kit Pearson is a very well-known Canadian author. This is a classic in Canadian children's literature. So yes, it's a perfect one to start with if you haven't read it already. The second book, I don't think I could do a video without mentioning this book, is Anne of Green Gables by Lucy Maud Montgomery. This is like the pinnacle of classic Canadian children's literature. It came out in 1908, I believe, and this is all about Anne, who's an orphan, and she goes to live on Prince Edward Island. And yeah, I don't think I really need to go into too much detail about this story because it's so popular and sort of omnipresent in our society. But I've got two copies to show you. So the first one is, this is the fairly standard edition, these paperbacks, and I have most of the series of these. I haven't read all of them actually. And the other one I have is this one here, which is an abridged version specifically for children. So I would say if you are reading to a little one, or if they're a bit older, then I would say go with the unabridged version. But if you're giving this to a child for them to read themselves and they're younger, then this version here is lovely. There's lots of other editions out there, but this one is from the 90s, and this one was actually from my dad, so from 1994 is what it says on the inside. But this one's just nice because it's got some pictures. So there's Anne and Diana drinking the cordial. Yes, so Anne of Green Gables, an absolute classic. If you haven't read it, no matter where you are in the world or how old you are, you must read it. Moving on, so another, not a specific book, but an author is an author that I think a lot of people are already aware of, and that's Robert Munsch. So he's Canadian and American. I think he's dual citizenship. But I believe he still writes, and so he has sort of more modern books out there for children. But of course, I grew up reading his books that were published in the 80s and the 90s. I don't have very many with me, but I found 3 tiny copies there that were 99 cents. I don't know if you could see that, but yeah, 99 cents back in the day. And yeah, I just remember these being really cute to read. But my favorite ones, I mean, they're all really good, but my favorite ones are The Paper Bag Princess. I think that's a wonderful book to gift to, well, boys or girls, but particularly little girls, just for having that sense of independence and pride in their abilities. And I also remember really liking Mortimer. I think this is one where he can't go to bed. Mortimer, go to bed. And then the other 2 that I really liked were Thomas's Snowsuit and 50 Below Zero. And the reason why I really like those 2 is because they're so specifically Canadian. So I grew up when I was younger in Ontario, and I had a snowsuit, and it didn't get to 50 Below Zero, but it certainly got quite chilly. And yeah, those 2 books just really sort of encapsulated how it was to be a Canadian child in the 1990s. So yeah, very nostalgic. But yeah, I think either the classics or the more modern versions, works of Robert Munsch would be perfect for children around the globe, or adults as well. You know, there's no age limit. The next one is Who Has Seen the Wind by W.O. Mitchell. So this is, again, a classic in Canadian children's literature. This is set in 1947, so just after the war. This is actually the year my dad was born. And my grandma actually gifted this specific edition to me. And I'd never heard of it before, and it's quite fitting that actually I ended up doing my master's degree on the prairies, not too far away from where this book is set. But this is about not really a coming of age story, but about a boy named Brian and all about his life on the prairies, and sort of his community. And it's just such a classic story, and it does a really good job of encapsulating life on the prairies, even though it was written in the 40s. Many of the sort of atmospheric elements are still, I would argue, applicable to today, living on the prairies, that sort of vast land of the living skies, as it says on the license plates, right? But yeah, so this one is it's a fun book, charming book to either read to children or let them read themselves. Okay, the next book, or books I should say, that I have to recommend, and I've mentioned these books before. I think I mentioned them in my BookTube newbie tag, which I'll link up in the cards. But these are the Dear Canada series, the Dear Canada Diaries. So these are all a series of books that are about a fictional girl, but it covers a real period in Canadian history. And it's told in a sort of diary format. And these were initially published in 2001, and I just looked up online, and I think the last one was published in 2016, and I think they're still going. So these are a great, I would say, educational tool. I mean, I love them just because I liked reading about history, but they really give you some additional context to understanding Canadian history. So I think they're a useful sort of supplementary educational tool in that sense. But yeah, just in terms of me enjoying them. I just have the Wikipedia article up so I could look back and remember some of the ones that I enjoyed. I really liked Alone in an Untamed Land. So that was the Fille du Roi diary of Hélène St-Onge in Montreal, New France, 1666. I also enjoyed Footprints in the Snow. That was the Red River diary of Isabel Scott, the Rupert's Land, 1815. And A Prairie as Wide as the Sea, Immigrant Diary of Ivy Weatherall and Milwaukee, Saskatchewan, 1926. But they cover so many different time periods. And I've looked just to see what some of the new ones are. that I obviously haven't read because I don't really read these anymore. But the most recent one that came out was in 2016, and it was These Are My Words, the Residential School Diary of Violet Penchance from Northern Ontario, 1966. So I really liked that these are sort of kept up with the times and are still covering different perspectives of Canadian history and different parts of Canadian history that are perhaps or have perhaps been overlooked in the past. So yes, you don't have to be from Canada to enjoy these. They might be a little bit tricky to get a hold of, but if you can get a hold of them, I would recommend either reading them yourself or sharing them with your children. All right, we've got 3 more to go. So the next one is The Secret World of Og by Pierre Berton. And this is a copy that I bought once I had moved to the UK because I just had this hankering to read it again, and I still enjoyed it the second time I read it. So that's nice, right? So yeah, Pierre Berton is a really well-known Canadian writer. And this was written in 1961, although I believe this particular edition with the illustrations came a little bit later. And what I like about this, apart from it's a charming story, is so Pierre Berton wrote a lot of history books, and this, I believe, is his only children's book that he wrote, and he really enjoyed it. It was one of his favorite books to write. The illustrations were all done by his daughter, and all of the characters were his family. So I liked that was very family history encapsulated in a fantastical fantasy book. But yeah, so The Secret World of Og is basically the children discover a world underneath their playhouse. And I mean, it's full of illustrations, both in black and white and color, but I mean, look at that, isn't that just charming? Yeah, and it's such a fun story. I will say that some of the language is a little bit dated, as it should be from being in the 1960s. So I would say maybe if you're reading this, either have a chat with your child beforehand or explain what some of the terminology means, but in general it still holds up to being a fun and an appropriate story for this day and age. But yeah, so that is The Secret World of Og. Yeah, still a firm favorite of mine. The next book that I wanted to share was published in 1997, and this is Trapped in Ice by Eric Walters. And this was a book that I was gifted by my aunt and uncle, and yeah, it just sort of stuck with me. I don't know if it's a really well-known Canadian book of children's literature, but I certainly remember it well. And this was about a true event from 1913. It was an expedition of Captain Robert Bartlett, and it's all about a girl and her brother who are on the ship when it's trapped in the ice in the Canadian Arctic, and their adventure of trying to survive that ordeal. But yeah, I remember it being quite a gripping story. It had some really good illustrations in it. And I liked the fact that it was based on true events and set in the Canadian Arctic, which is where my dad spent most of his working career. So yeah, that was a fun story, and if you haven't seen it, maybe try and get a copy and check it out. And last but not least, I wanted to give a shout out to a book that I don't think is considered classic Canadian children's literature, but this is a book that is set from where I'm from, near Vancouver. So this is Miracle at Willow Creek by Annette Lebois. And this is a story all about sandhill cranes. So there's a girl named Tess, and she becomes very passionate about sandhill cranes, like the bird species. And there's a proposal for sort of the local area habitat of these sandhill cranes to be turned into a golf course, which I know very well happens a lot from where I'm from. Yeah, so it's all about Tess and her friends trying to protect the sandhill cranes. And it was just really nice to read a story set specifically where I'm from, and that was published in 1998. But yes, so those are all of the books that I wanted to recommend. If you want an introduction to Canadian classic children's literature, although some not really classics. Yeah, have you read any of these? Or are there any classic Canadian children's works that I haven't mentioned that you think should be sort of promoted more? Yeah, let me know in the comments. And I would also be interested to know, if you are not from Canada, what are some of the books that you would recommend as classic literature from the country that you're from? I'm always interested to know from like a nostalgic point of view what people grew up with, because it really sort of sets you up for your perspective in life, right? But yes, so without waffling on too much longer, those are the Canadian books that I want to share with you. And I hope you're all doing well, and I'll see you soon in a new video.